Chag said he used to sit there, same time every morning, like clockwork, right on that splintered bench outside the courthouse, sun rising behind the steeple, a quiet shadow under his hat brim. He never said much when he was out there, just sat still, watching, waiting. Some folks in town said he was crazy. Others said he was just stubborn. But to me, he was just my grandfather. Welcome to Injustice Browin. I'm Mark Joie, if this story moves you. If you believe that truth, no matter how long buried, deserves light, then subscribe and share your voice in the comments below. Your words matter here, just like his did. The last time I saw that bench, I was 10. We'd driven down from Baton Rouge for Thanksgiving. The adults were busy arguing politics, and I slipped out the side door, wandered across the street, and found him there. Same bench, same stare. I sat next to him, said nothing. He didn't turn to me, but I remember his hand, resting on the cracked wood beside mine. That silence felt heavier than words. That bench, it wasn't just wood and nails. It held something, a kind of grief that didn't move, like it got stuck there and never left. I'm back in that town, now, after 20 years, after law school, the bar exam, and a career that kept me far away from this place. But the call came last week. My grandfather, Elijah Thomas, was gone. Natural causes, they said, 86 years old, died in his sleep, peaceful. That word doesn't sit right with me. I drove back down alone. Didn't tell my firm, didn't tell anyone, just pointed the car toward the old roads, windows down, tires humming against the asphalt like they remembered the way. The town hadn't changed much. The diner still had that faded Coca-Cola sign, the church steeple still crooked to the left, and the courthouse still stood tall, white columns and all, like it was proud. And there it was, the bench, worn smooth now, cracked deeper, like time had tried to split it in half but couldn't. I walked over, slow, my throat tightened. It felt like walking into a memory you didn't want to relive but couldn't ignore. I sat down, same spot he used to sit, the wood creaked under me like it recognized the weight. I looked at the courthouse, tried to see what he saw all those years, tried to feel what he felt. But all I felt was the quiet and something buried underneath it. He sat there almost every day for decades, rain or shine, just him, that bench, and the courthouse that never answered back. As a kid, I never asked him why. I was too young to understand that grief can stretch over generations and still not find a voice. The townspeople used to whisper. Some said he was waiting for someone to confess. Others said he was protesting something no one remembered anymore. A few believed he was just mourning, but no one ever asked him. Not really, not even me. I stayed on that bench for an hour, maybe more. Cars passed, a few people glanced over, then looked away, same way they did with him, like they didn't want to disturb whatever that bench was holding. Then I saw it, just beneath the bench, tucked in the space where the wood had warped something hidden. My hand shook a little as I reached down, a corner of metal. I pulled, a box, rusted, small, and cold. I didn't open it, not yet. Instead, I looked back up at the courthouse, and I whispered something I hadn't said since I was a child. I'm here now, not because I knew what I was about to uncover, not because I was brave, but because sometimes the dead don't stay quiet, and the past doesn't stay buried. And that bench, it had been waiting to die. ChatGPT said in 1954. Elijah Thomas had something most black men in the South didn't dare carry to openly pride. He was only 24, but already a teacher, sharp-minded, clean-cut, respected by his community. Not rich, but respected. That meant something back then, especially in a town like Millstone, where the rules were carved into the bones of the sidewalks, white on one side, black on the other. And don't forget your place. He lived with his mother and younger brother, Isaac, 16, all limbs and laughter. Bright as a matchstick and twice as quick. Isaac didn't walk, he bounced. That boy had dreams. Talked about Chicago like it was heaven. Said he'd be a radio DJ one day. The voice of the people, he used to say, puffing his chest out like he was already famous. Elijah would laugh, roll his eyes, and say, "You gotta graduate high. School first, fool." And Isaac would flash that wide grin, all teeth and hope. Then came that night. It was August, hot, the kind of heat that makes your skin feel borrowed. Elijah had just come back from a church meeting. He was grading papers. By lamplight, when the knock came sharp and fast, a neighbor, eyes wide, breath short, They took him. Took who? Your brother. The sheriff and a few others said he touched a white girl at the grocery. Elijah froze. The words didn't make sense at first. Then they hit all at once, like glass breaking inside his chest. He ran. Didn't think. Didn't change clothes. Just ran straight down Main Street, past the diner, past the church, toward the courthouse. Legs pumping like they could stop time. But time was already gone. When he got there, it was too late. Isaac was hanging right there. Behind the courthouse, a single bulb above the back door lit the scene. Shadows stretched across the wall like monsters. A rope, a broken body, and silence thick as tar. Elijah screamed. He screamed so loud his throat tore, but nobody came. The sheriff was still there, leaning on the wall, smoking like it was just another Friday night. When he saw Elijah, he nodded once and said 3 words Elijah would never forget. Justice was served. No trial, no lawyer, no defense. Just an accusation from a white girl who later admitted, privately, that she lied to avoid getting caught sneaking out with a boy her father wouldn't approve of. But that truth never made it to court. It never even made it to paper. Elijah, tried for months, letters to state officials, appeals to the NAACP. He even went to the courthouse himself, begged for an investigation. Nothing. Doors closed. Phones went silent. People turned away. They told him to let it go. Said bringing up old wounds only stirred trouble. One man said, best thing to do is forget, as if forgetting your baby brother swinging from a rope could ever be an option. So Elijah did the only thing he could. He sat. He found that bench outside the courthouse and made it his own. Every morning, every afternoon for years. No signs, no shouts, just presence. That was his protest. That was his mourning. They tried to ignore him, pretend, and he was part of the scenery. But they saw him. Every judge, every cop, every clerk that walked past knew why he was there, and some of them flinched when their eyes met his. Because he wasn't just looking at the building. He was watching the cracks in the foundation. He was waiting for them to widen. And that pain, his pain didn't stay locked in him. It spread like roots, quiet, slow, invisible at first, but it reached us, the kids, the neighbors, the next generation. Even years later, when I was just a child sitting next to him, I could feel it, not in words, not in stories, but in the way he sat, in the way he stared at that courthouse like it owed him blood. That bench, it wasn't just where he grieved, it was where he remembered the last place his brother stood, and the ground beneath it still holds the scars. Jack said, I waited until after the funeral, after the dirt was packed down and the voices had faded, after the casseroles were wrapped in foil and the old neighbors stopped squeezing my arm, telling me how proud Elijah was of me, how proud he must be. I didn't come back for their comfort. I came back for him. The morning after we laid him to rest, I returned to that bench. Same time he used to go. The air was thick, the sky barely pink. I stood there for a long time, just looking at it, like it might talk back. Then I knelt down. The box was still there, wedged in that warped corner beneath the frame. Cold metal, rusted shut, but the lock gave way easy once I found the catch underneath. He left it hidden, but not locked up too tight, like he wanted someone to find it. Me. Maybe inside were papers, dozens of them, yellowed and curling at the edges, newspaper clippings folded in half, court records, a burnt corner of a diary. The smell of ash and time hit me as I pulled it all out, slow, careful, like I was unwrapping a wound. He'd been keeping it for decades. Records of arrests that didn't line up, transcripts from trials that never should have happened, letters from families, handwritten in trembling script pleading for help, for truth, for someone to listen. Most had gone unanswered. Some were stamped received, then buried. And there were photos, grainy black and whites, a boy, eyes swollen shut, a mother, kneeling in a field, holding her son's shoe, a crowd of white men in uniforms, smiling to wide in front of the courthouse steps. But it was the names that hit me hardest, the same last name, over and over again. Harlan, Judge Harlan, Sheriff Harlan, Deputy C. Harlan. One family, same bloodline, different uniforms, different decades, but the same reach, the same grip. I felt something cold settle in my chest. That name was still on the courthouse door today. Judge William Harlan III. I saw it just the day before. Bronze letters, proud and shining, like history hadn't happened at all. I leaned back on the bench and stared at the building across from me. That box, it wasn't just a collection. It was a case my grandfather had built in silence over 40 years. He didn't protest with signs. He didn't shout in the street. He gathered, quietly, carefully, patiently. He watched them, and he waited, not just for justice, but for someone to pick up where he left off. I thumbed through the burned edge of the diary. The writing was shaky near the end. One line repeated across the pages. "They think I'm done watching." He knew he was running out of time. He knew the town wouldn't change unless somebody forced it to, and now, that somebody was me. I closed the box, my fingers trembling. This wasn't just about my grandfather anymore. This was about a system that had covered itself in time and tradition, a courthouse built on bones, a legacy painted over with fresh white paint but rotten. Underneath, he wasn't just sitting on that bench. He was building a case no one knew existed, and now, the past he buried was mine to dig up. ChatGPT said. I filed the motion on a Wednesday. Clear sky, quiet streets, almost peaceful. If you didn't know what peace cost in a place like Millstone, I walked it into the courthouse myself, slid the folder across the clerk's desk, made eye contact. Her hand paused for a second before she took it, just a flicker. But I saw it. She knew what this meant. The case I filed wasn't new. Not really. It was old blood, dried thick under floorboards that had never been scrubbed. I wasn't naming names out loud just yet, just reopening the file on Isaac Thomas, my uncle, a minor, lynched without trial. No investigation, no justice, unsolved death. I wrote, request for posthumous judicial review. They weren't expecting that. 2 days later, the warnings started. The first one came from a neighbor, Mrs. Holloway, the woman who used to braid my hair when I was a kid, now slow-moving with a walker and cataracts. She stopped me outside the corner store, pulled me close, whispered through her teeth, "Baby, they don't want that case dug up. Let him rest. Let it die." I nodded, but I didn't stop. Then the truck started showing up. Black Ford, same one, parked across the street from my office in Baton Rouge, always empty, windows tinted, just sitting there, watching, every day for a week. And then my office was broken into. Nothing stolen, not a laptop, not $1, but the file was moved. The one with my grandfather's box, the records, the clippings, just slightly shifted, like someone had opened it, read it, closed it back. That's when I knew. This wasn't just small-town resistance. This was something deeper, something protected. I got a call that weekend from Judge Monroe. First black judge in the parish, been sitting the bench over 20 years. He asked me to come by the courthouse after hours, said he wanted to talk, man to man. I met him in his chambers. Door locked, blinds drawn. He poured the fingers of whiskey, didn't offer any to me. "You think justice lives in this building?" he said, not even looking up. "She died here long ago, buried right next to your uncle." I didn't say anything. He finally looked at me. "You poke this thing hard enough, it's not just the snakes that come out. It's the hands that been feeding them for generations." I asked him, point blank, "Are you telling me to back off?" He took a sip, then looked down into the glass like it held history. "I'm telling you, be sure you can carry what you uncover, because once it's out, it doesn't go back." I left his office with more weight than when I walked in, but I didn't stop. I started building the case anyway, quietly, patiently, just like Elijah. I had enough documents to show a pattern, enough names to form a timeline, but I needed a voice, someone still breathing, someone who was there, and I found him. He was 87, living in a nursing home just outside of town. Wallace Franks White, worked as a deputy in the 50s, retired in the 70s, no visitors, no children, just memories and a conscience that had eaten him alive. He agreed to talk, not on camera, not in public, but with me. He said he remembered. Isaac said he remembered the sheriff getting the call, gathering a group of men before sundown. Said the girl never pressed charges. Said the sheriff told them, "This town don't need no trial, just a message." Wallace cried when he said that. A grown man, wrinkled hands trembling in his lap. He told me Elijah had come to him once, years later, asked him to speak, but Wallace said no. Said he was scared. Said his wife begged him not to stir anything. "She's been dead 10 years now," he said, wiping his face. "I've been quiet long enough." With his statement, I had what I needed, The last piece. Eyewitness testimony to a murder. State condoned. Covered up. And now. Exposed. But as the truth came into focus, so did the threats. A brick through my windshield. A note taped to my office door. Let the dead stay dead. And the truck. It followed me home this time. I stood in my driveway. Watched the engine idle. Just the headlights and a slow rumble. Then it backed. Away. They wanted me scared. But fear doesn't stick the same way once you see real injustice. Once you buried someone who waited a lifetime for a single truth to be spoken out loud. So I went back to the courthouse, filed the witness affidavit, motioned for a full public hearing. At this time, I added the Harlan name to the filing, directly, not as a witness, not as a bystander, but as a defendant. Because this story didn't end in 1954, it just waited for someone to call it what it really was. Chag said the courtroom was small, wood-paneled walls, a ceiling fan that squeaked on every turn. Same room where Elijah once begged for anyone to listen. Now, after all these years, after all the silence and warnings and ghosts, it was full, not just locals, national. Reporters sat in the back row, notebooks open, cameras banned, but eyes wide. The story had finally clawed its way to the surface, and the town of Millstone couldn't look away anymore. I sat at the plaintiff's table, heart steady, eyes sharp. Every file, every photo, every word in my grandfather's box laid out like truth on trial. And across from me, the prosecutor, Daniel Harlan, grandson of the sheriff who strung my uncle up behind this very building. He wore the same tight jaw, same nameplate, same courthouse, different century. He didn't smile, didn't blink, much either, just stared at me like I dragged his family name through mud. But it wasn't me who did that. It was history. The first witness was Wallace Franks, shaky hands, weak voice, but he stood, sworn, and told the room what they had buried for 70 years. I watched them tie that rope, he said. I watched the boy beg, and I did nothing. No one moved. No one coughed. Even the judge leaned forward. Next came the court clerk from 1954's grand jury, retired now. Living in Georgia, her voice was firm. She said records had been removed, sealed, lost. But she remembered. She remembered a sealed envelope, a confession that never made it to court. Buried under orders, we entered the physical evidence, my grandfather's notes, letters from the families, the photographs, the cover-ups, the bribes. And when the clerk read out the name Harlan on an internal memo approving a closed investigation, everything shifted. The prosecutor objected, called it hearsay, called it a witch hunt against the town's legacy. But the judge allowed it, because this wasn't about legacies anymore. It was about facts, about blood, about silence paid for in generations. And on the third day, I stood up myself, not as a lawyer, as a grandson, as a voice for a boy named Isaac who never got to grow old. I told them what that bench had meant, what it still meant. I told them about Elijah, who sat and waited not just for justice but for someone who would listen. I saw some of the jurors wipe their eyes. The prosecutor didn't cross-examine me, didn't need to. The case had already been laid bare, not in legal code, but in conscience. 12 people sat in that jury box, 6 white, for black, to Latino, different walks, same courtroom. They went back to deliberate 2 hours later. They returned. The foreman stood. His voice didn't shake in the matter of the wrongful death of Isaac Thomas and the failure of Millstone law enforcement to pursue justice. We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff. They said it loud, clear. They ruled that what happened was murder. They ruled that the town had failed. They ruled that silence was guilt. I didn't cry, not in that room. But when I stepped outside and the reporters swarmed and the courthouse doors closed behind me, then I felt it. A weight leave my chest. Not gone, but lifted, for Isaac, for Elijah, for every quiet cry this country tried to ignore. They thought time would wash it all away. But history remembers, and so do we. I came back alone, no cameras, no reporters, just me and the road that always knew the way. Millstone looked the same, still quiet, still slow, but something felt different. Like the air itself had exhaled, like the town had let go of a secret. It had held it tight for too long. I parked across from the courthouse, walked the sidewalk I had walked 100 times as a boy, past the diner, past the rusted mailboxes, to that place where truth had once sat quietly, waiting. The bench was there, but it wasn't the same that would have been replaced. Still simple, still familiar, but smooth now, strong, and right beside it, mounted on a post just tall enough to notice, was a plaque, bronze, clean, no speech, no summary, just a name, Elijah Thomas. I stood there for a while, reading it over and over. No titles, no dates, just his name. And somehow, that said everything. He didn't need a monument. That bench was his monument. He didn't need a statue. His silence had already stood taller than any stone could. I sat down, just like he used to. Same time of day, sun behind the courthouse, light spilling through the trees, and for the first time in my life, I felt peace there. Not sorrow, not anger, just peace. I looked at the courthouse still white, still proud, still standing. But this time, it didn't feel untouchable. It didn't feel like something to fear. It felt like something we had reclaimed. I leaned back and closed my eyes, took a deep breath, let it settle. Then I spoke, not loud, just enough. They heard. You, Granddad. The wind moved through the trees. They finally heard you. I could almost feel him sitting next to me, hat tilted low, hands folded, watching the courthouse with that same steady look, but not waiting anymore, not grieving, just there. And I knew, somehow, that he'd been waiting for this moment, not for the town to apologize, not for the headlines, but for the truth to be spoken, out loud, in the open, where no one could silence it again. I stood up, touched the edge of the plaque with my fingertips. It was warm from the sun. Then I turned and walked away, not because I was done, but because he finally was. And that bench, it still watches, not with sorrow, but with pride.